So, when I say the word propaganda, what pops into your head? Probably some old, grainy, black and white posters, right? Well, what if I told you it's evolved? That it's turned into something way more sophisticated, way more subtle, something you probably run into every single day. Let's get into it and unpack how propaganda went from the past right into our present.
So quick question for you, and be honest, are you sure you can always spot it when you see it? Because, well, after we go through this, you might start noticing it in some pretty unexpected places.
Okay, before we dive any deeper, we've got to get on the same page. We need a really clear definition. Because without one, the word propaganda can kind of mean anything and everything, which, ironically, is exactly how the people who use it want it to be.
At its heart, propaganda is basically communication with a mission. It's not just about sharing info. It's about using art, the media, really any tool you can get your hands on to push a very specific political message and convince an audience to see the world in a particular way.
A simple definition is a good starting point for sure, but to really get a feel for the power and the mechanics of propaganda, we have to look at the system that pretty much perfected it as a tool of the state.
So let's take a trip back in time to the early 20th century, right into the middle of the Russian Revolution. This is where we get the term agitprop. It's literally a mashup of agitation and propaganda. And look, this wasn't about subtle hints. This was a massive all-out effort to completely reshape reality, using every single medium they had to build a new communist society from the ground up.
Just take a look at the style of this poster. It's not trying to be clever or complicated, is it? It asks these really simple questions. You want to overcome cold? You want to eat? And it gives one simple answer. Join the labor brigades. It's got this stark, bold, almost cartoonish look to deliver a message you just can't miss. That was classic agitprop. Loud, clear, and super direct.
And this just shows you the sheer scale of their ambition. The Bolsheviks didn't stop at posters. Oh no, they created mobile propaganda factories. These agitrains would roll into remote villages, packed with performers and artists. They even had their own printing presses on board to whip up custom posters right on the spot, designed to hit on local issues. It was a media machine on wheels. Incredible.
So here's the thing to remember. This was a total system. They controlled the newspapers, making Pravda the only game in town for information. They sent speakers out to the countryside. They had those amazing trains. And here's the genius part. They started literacy campaigns, but guess what books they used to teach people to read? Textbooks filled with their ideology. They covered every single angle.
So that was the old way, right? Overt, state-run, pretty easy to point your finger at. But what happens when propaganda goes invisible? What if it's not coming from some government office, but from the very structure of our own media?
And that question brings us to a much more modern and, frankly, much more unsettling theory. It was most famously laid out by the linguist and political critic Noam Chomsky. He called it manufacturing consent.
This quote is everything. Think about it. In a dictatorship, the state can just use force to make people do what they want. But in a democracy, Chomsky says, that control has to be more subtle. You do it by shaping what people think, by managing public opinion, by manufacturing their consent. In other words, through propaganda. So here's how Chomsky's model breaks it down. Society is split. You've got about 80% of the people, the masses, who are basically kept distracted and not really engaged with politics. Then you have the other 20%, the specialized class. These are the educated folks, the managers, journalists, the people making policy. Now here's the wild part. The main target of propaganda isn't the 80%, it's the 20%. The goal is to get them to believe the ideology, because they're the ones running the systems that keep the masses distracted.
So how does this all happen without some secret group pulling the strings? Well, Chomsky laid out these 5 filters that news has to pass through before it ever gets to us. First up, ownership. Most big media outlets are owned by huge corporations. So naturally, stories that might hurt corporate profits probably aren't going to be front-page news. Second, advertising. Where does the money come from? Ads. From other corporations. You're not likely to bite the hand that feeds you. Third, sources. The media relies heavily on official sources from the government and big business, which gives those guys incredible power to frame every story. Fourth, flack. If a news outlet does step out of line, they get hit with flack. Think angry letters, organized boycotts, lawsuits, all designed to push them back in line. And finally, you create a common enemy. It used to be communism. Now it might be terrorism or something else. It's a way to scare everyone into rallying around the flag and supporting the status quo.
So the result of all these filters, and this is the really important part, it's not some grand conspiracy. It's a system that just naturally shrinks the range of what's considered acceptable debate. Each filter supports the others, creating this loop where ideas that challenge power get weeded out, and ideas that support it get amplified.
Okay, so we've seen the loud, old-school propaganda and the quiet, systemic kind we have today. Now let's build a little toolkit so you can actually spot these techniques out in the wild.
So just a quick recap, right? Agitprop is loud and obvious. Manufacturing consent is quiet and built into the system. But a lot of the same rhetorical tricks can actually show up in both of them.
Let's look at a few of the greatest hits. You've got the bandwagon effect, Everyone's doing it, so you should too. It creates this feeling that you're going to be left out. Then there are loaded words, using these really emotionally charged terms like freedom fighter or elite to just bypass your brain and go straight for your gut. And definitely watch out for transfer, like when you see a politician standing in front of a giant flag. They're trying to transfer your patriotic feelings onto them. Once you learn the names for these, you start seeing them absolutely everywhere.
So, if we're basically swimming in this stuff, what are we supposed to do about it? Well, Chomsky didn't just point out the problem. He also suggested a solution. He called it developing a course of intellectual self-defense.
He boiled it down to two key actions. First, you have to actively seek out alternative media. Don't just rely on a couple of major corporate news sources. Find the independent journalists, the outlets that operate outside of those 5 filters. And second, get organized. He argued that real change doesn't happen when we're all alone. It comes from people working together, from the ground up.
So really, the whole point is this. The best defense against propaganda is to stop being just a passive spectator who consumes information, and to become an active, critical participant. It's about developing an independent mind that can question, that can analyze, and that can see beyond the picture that's being presented to you.
And all of this leaves us with Chomsky's final, incredibly powerful question. It really forces us to decide if we want a society full of engaged, free-thinking people, or if we'd rather have a society where tricky ideas are just managed and swept under the rug. Because in the end, that choice might be more important than we think.